Hey guys, this is Mr. Kapler. I just want to go ahead and show you how to get started on modeling your site. Alright, so if you take a look at our cabin project and we take a look at like what we're trying to build, the cabin itself was based on a set of plans that I found on houseplans.com. This isn't like my own cabin or anything like that. I really was just looking for a small project, just something that we could kick off and try to figure out just the basics of Revit with. So, you know, the site itself isn't a real place. It doesn't really exist, but there was a couple elements to it that I wanted to kind of keep intact. So I like the idea of this thing sitting on the water. So you have like some water, little sandy area, and then in the back, you know, we just kind of designed or set up like a little flat piece of land where the cabin can sit. And I actually made that grass in my set of plans. So I'm going to have you guys try to do the same. All right. So if we look at the cabin site on the sheet, on the drawing sheet, it's more of a rectangular plot of land. All right, it's a little bit narrower than it is long, probably like 2-to-1 dimensions. All right, and then we have like the water area, we have some sand, and we have that grassy area. And there is a little bit of an elevation change from the water up to where the cabin sits. All right. So what I did was I'm actually going to kind of teach this or show you how to do it where there's a 75-foot width to the property, 150-foot depth. All right, we still incorporate each of those three respective areas. All right, and then I'm going to have you set up the material properties for each one of those so that you have water, sand, and then grass. All right, the water itself is going to be at -5 feet. The ground is going to be at 0 feet. And then the site is actually just going to kind of slope up from the water into the ground that the cabin's sitting on. So let's take a look at how to get started. All right. To do so, I do want you to start with a brand new project. All right. I know I have something open here, but I'm just going to start brand new. So I'm going to go new project. And when we get over there, one thing I want you to do is I want you to choose from the drop down this time. All right. So you're going to go to the Imperial Architectural template. And that's where we're going to start. So imperial is just like feet and inches. Architectural is really just going to set you up with that level 1, level 2, and site. All right, that you're going to need to start building from, and we're going to customize levels and things like that later. But it gets you in a good place where you can begin. All right. Once you get in there, I would recommend saving as. All right, so we're going to save it as a project, and we'll just give it a name. So I'm going to call it cabin _ Kapler. And then since we're working on just the site, I'll kind of give it like a subheading here. And I'll save that so that I know this is like my site version of the project. And I might update that when we get into the next one. All right. From there, I'm going to have you bounce over to the actual site plans. All right. And we can zoom out just a little bit. And we're going to use model lines just to kind of trace out and define where that site is going to go. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use a rectangle. I'm going to draw up a rectangular set of lines. All right, and as of right now, I have like these elevation boxes. We can always grab the square part of that and move them out of our way if they're in our way. Personally, I don't think they're in the way currently. We'll just leave them alone for now. All right, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and select one of the lines that defines the boundary for the site. All right, and I would like for the width of the property to be 75 feet, and I'd like the depth of it to be 150. So we need to change that. All right, so you can start on either side. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to pick on this, longest line on the left. And when you click on that, you should see those temporary dimensions pop up. Many of you should be familiar with this from last year or the end of the year before. All right, basically this is giving us a temporary dimension. All right, but we're noticing that the number is blue, which means it's editable. So if I pick on that side line, I can change the distance between this line, all right, and its parallel line over here that the computer's picking up as a temporary dimension. So what we can do is we can just move those lines, we can get them closer to each other, all right, or you can just pick one and you can click on that number and you can change its definition. So I want that to ultimately be 75 feet, all right, so I can just key in the variable 75. If I put a space, that separates feet and inches, so the first set of numbers is going to be feet. If I put the space in, I could always put inches after. All right, so 75 foot 6 inch would actually be 75 space 6. All right, I don't actually want that 6 inches in there, so I'm going to clear that out. I just wanted to take an opportunity to kind of talk about dimensions a little bit. And then if I move that line again later, that number is going to change. But if I hold down Control and pick the other parallel line and move them as a group, notice that that relationship stays the same. So if you move something as a group together in a direction, that is going to stay consistent, all right? Or obviously if you move one element, it's going to kind of wash that out. One thing you can do, you can always click on that little dimension button to create a permanent dimension. Once it's a permanent dimension, you can always lock it in place. You know, so as we need to move things around, if we were to shift the boundary, kind of get things in the center, you could lock that in place that way. The other dimension I wanted to edit was the distance from the front line to the back line. So I wanted this to be 150 feet. All right, so I can pick on one of those two lines. Either this line has to move or this line has to move to make this 150 feet. You could do so visually just with your arrow keys or by moving that line, by clicking and dragging it. Fastest way is to select one of the two lines, start moving it, and then just change the number. All right, so that makes it editable. Once it's in there, like I said, you can go ahead and you can click on that little option to make it a permanent dimension. You can always lock it in place. Now when you move the rectangle around, whether it be up or down, the dimensions are always going to stay in place. And if you want to move those elevation symbols outside of the box, you can. All right, but you have your project essentially defined, your topography defined width-wise and height-wise now with model lines. All right, and model lines are great because model lines show up in 3D. Okay, so they show up in 3D here and they show up in the site. So it's a great tool to use for tracing something that you need to be able to see, you know, dimensions on that you can't actually put dimensions on in for. So great example, topo surface. All right, let's go ahead and add a topo surface to this. So what we want to try to do is create a piece of topography that kind of looks roughly like what we see here. So you have like a little piece of water down here. I tried to create like a little bit of a natural boundary between the water and the sand, and then the same thing up here for the sand and the grass. So there's like a little bit of a curve in there. All right, but for the most part, you have a relatively simple piece of topography. So we'll go up to our massing and site tools. All right, we'll click on that topo surface button, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some points in at 0 feet 0 inches. All right, I'm going to start in the top left-hand corner. I'm just going to pick right at the intersection of that upper leftmost boundary. We'll go there, we'll go to the upper rightmost boundary. I'm going to put a couple of points in kind of around like the middle of the property here. So we'll just find like that midpoint along the line. The midpoint is going to be that purple triangular inference. All right, and then we'll just kind of put like a little bit of a curve in here. Just a nice like natural curve where the site is. Nothing crazy, doesn't have to be hugely specific. Just do the best you can. Then we're going to drop down, we're going to go -5. For the elevation, and then this is going to be like kind of the edge of the sand down here up against the lake. All right, and then we're going to put in 2 more points, one in the bottom left and one in the bottom right, and that should create the boundaries that we want for our site. Now one thing I'm seeing like one thick black boundary line, but nothing else detail wise, like indicating, you know, what's going on with the site, which I think is kind of funny. Like in 3D you can see it sloping down. If we turn on color and we go consistent colors, you can see, you know, like there definitely is a change in topography height or elevation height, but you can't really see it well defined. So one thing that you want to do is go up to your massing and site tools, and underneath model site, there's a little down arrow where you can actually change the increments. So right now it's not showing contour lines in intervals of anything less than 10 feet. So what we're going to do is we're just going to change that value. Let's make that 1 foot. All right, and instantaneously you see a difference between what was on the screen and what's being displayed now. So now you have like that -5 foot territory down here, and then every one of these lines is going to represent 1 foot of elevation change. So -5 feet, -4, -3, -2, -1, and then there's a 0 up here. All right, and at that point, if you want to get rid of those little green model lines, you certainly can. You just select them and delete them. Be careful not to accidentally pick your piece of topography and delete it, but now you have your piece of topography modeled out. So it's 75 feet wide, 100 feet deep, and you have that topography change from one height to the next. All right. Next thing I want to do is I want to divide this into a couple pieces. So we have grass here, we have sand here, we have water down here. So let's go ahead and divide this one chunk of topography into a couple of pieces. To do that, you're using your split surface tool. So split surface splits a topo surface into 2 distinct surfaces. All right, so if I click on that tool, And then I follow my instructions on the screen. It says select a surface to split. I just have to pick it. I can't pick in the middle. I have to pick an edge. All right, so I'm going to pick an edge. Basically, the computer just wants me to put a boundary across the piece of topography, cutting it into two pieces. So if I were to put like one line, all right, where I'm cutting my topography in half here from the top, watch this. If I hit the little green check mark, now I have two distinct different surfaces, right? So I have one that I could make grass, I have one that I can make water. Obviously that line isn't exactly where we wanted it, so I'm just going to hit undo and kind of go back to the portion where I'm drawing lines. And instead of using a straight line, you could certainly use a straight line. Instead of using a straight line, I'm going to use a spleen. All right, so a spleen is just a complex curve, all right, that the more points you enter into the computer, the more rigidly defined that spline is going to be drawn. All right, so if I just put a bunch of clicks like right around that top boundary, but cutting the surface in half, I can go ahead and I can cut that into two separate pieces. And then we're going to do the same exact tool one more time. So split surface, we'll pick this bottom section, and we'll kind of cut right across here. We'll do our best to try to get that really close. You could go right on the line if you wanted to. There's ways to clean it up later on that I can kind of work with people individually on and things like that. But for the most part, that looks pretty good. But we have our surface cut up into two different sections here. All right, so we have our grass, our sand, and our water. And now we just have to go back through and we have to set up materials to kind of showcase those different sections. So what we'll do is we'll pick the top area, all right, and in your properties bar, all right, you're now going to see the properties for the piece of topography that's selected. The very first option is to change the material, all right, so I'm going to click on this little dot 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 button next to material. When the screen pops up, couple of things. Your screen will probably look like this just to start with. All right, I don't work with my screen like that. I don't think you should either. You should take that, drag it to the top left-hand corner, stretch it out a little bit bigger, just by grabbing the bottom right grip. All right, and then you need to show your material libraries. So those are important things. All right. Next up, you can search for the material that you're using. In this project, there are no grass materials, but in the library that we just expanded, there is. So you can click that grass option. You can hit the little up arrow, which is going to bring it into the project. All right, there it is. It's now in the project. It's ready to go. One thing I want you to do, you got to take a look at the graphics options. All right, so when you render this material or when you see it in a realistic display setting, it's going to show as grass. But just in a default shaded view, it won't. So you have to hit this little check mark for use render appearance for shading. So it's going to reference the green color. It's going to apply that to just your regular consistent colors view, and you'll see something kind of like this pop up. So when I say consistent colors, I'm talking about consistent colors or shaded options down here. Obviously, hidden line doesn't display any color, but shaded, it will show up green, and in consistent colors, it will show up green. And then obviously in realistic, it's going to put the grass texture on there for you. All right. Typically stay in consistent colors and shaded just so you can move your computer. Your computer moves a little bit faster, and you can, spin your project around. There's no lag. All right. Let's go to this next section. We're going to put sand on here. All right. So if you pick the corner or an edge of that sandy section of the beach, we'll go right back up to properties. Now we have this new piece of topography selected. We'll go over to material, hit the little dot 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 button. I'm going to search for sand. I see it in my materials library, but it's not in the file, so we're just going to load it up into the project. We'll hit that little use render appearance button for shading, and that's set up as sand now. And then we'll go down to this bottom option. We'll do the same exact thing, and we're going to call this water. And we'll load a water texture into the project. All right. That takes care of your site. A couple little things that you might do just to kind of review, I guess. All right, we went over topography or topo surface. A topo surface is a surface that's going to represent the ground in a 3D view or in site plan view. You can really only put them in there. It should not be displayed in a floor plan view, so you won't see your site in a floor plan view. All right, but it should show up in the site plan view. It should show up in a 3D view. All right, some other site tools that you can use just to kind of embellish the scene a little bit. All right, you have your site components. All right, there are a lot of different components that you can add. Easiest are trees. Trees are already kind of in the scene. You can grab a couple of trees and just kind of decorate the back area of your yard there just a little bit if you want to. Trees are going to show up as like little cardboard cutouts in consistent and shaded views, actually even in hidden line. But if you go realistic, they're going to look a little bit realistic and they're going to be nice for your rendering. All right. We do want to leave a little section here, kind of in the center front of the flat piece of topography for your cabin. All right. And other than that, we're going to aim it like pointing right down here, looking at the lake. So we should be all set up for that. So you should have a site drawn, all right, or modeled in 3D. It should be 75 feet wide, 150 feet deep, -5 feet down here at the water, 0 feet up in the backyard. And when you're finished with this, if you could just do a quick snip for me, all right, hit that little Windows button, type in SNIP. You're going to use the snipping tool. We're going to create a new snip, and all I really need to see is your topography that you model. So you can go ahead and save a picture of that, and you can turn that in for this section, the small section of the cabin project. I'm going to give you 10 points just for this one thing, and then obviously you're getting 100 points for the entire thing in its entirety on that drawing sheet. But for right now, this is all I can really assess. So go ahead and turn that in when you have it done, and then I'll post that next section up there when people are ready for it. All right? Good luck. Ask questions if you have them. I'm here to help you.